So I would just like our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us their current role and how they are involved or were involved in the partnership and representation. To kick off the session, Seb, would you mind starting the session?
Sure. Thank you, Misha, and thank you, Dina and Andrea, for that introduction and for the Indigenous reputation. That was lovely. So my name is Dr. Seb Giannotti. I work in the School of Languages and Cultures here at UQ, and my role here is as a teaching fellow in digital curriculum design. So in short, that's kind of supporting teachers in innovation or support through digital or blended learning or digitally enhanced learning. So that's my current role. And how I've been engaged in student partnership is since probably the inception or since the beginning of my role in 2018. Student partnership has been in every aspect of our role. Yes, students as partners, I guess, is also a real underpinning philosophy of mine through my PhD as well in critical pedagogy. So that's where students are also not just change agents, but are forces of empowerment. And where I see students as partners and how this embodies both my academic side, but it's also the self-actualization of my work. So it's the beauty of what I've practiced. I have finally the chance to practice to what I teach and preach through and with students together on our projects. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of my role, and I hope that covers anything, but happy to answer more questions as we go along. Thank you, Misha.
Thank you so much, Seb. Victor, would you like to introduce
yourself? Yeah, certainly. I'll jump in here. Hopefully the audio is working. As a little bit of an introduction, my name is Victor Hasser. I graduated from the University of Queensland in 2018 with honours. And in that year, 2018, through my honours research, I was exposed to some of the early student-staff partnership work that was going on. And initially, the first student-staff partnership I worked on was a redesign of a third-year biomedical science course, which ultimately led to being involved in the running of the first inaugural student-staff partnership showcase, which back then was in sort of a physical form, but this is great. So basically, where do I see student-staff partnerships and representation more broadly? I think that they're a fantastic way that sort of changed the paradigm and people's understandings of teaching and learning and getting students involved is just, I think, just such a fantastic thing that is gaining momentum, is continuously growing. I am a huge advocate for student-staff partnerships just based on what it's been able to do for me in my role after graduating uni at KPMG for a little under 2 years. And now in my position, going back to my family business and helping them out. So like what Seb said, happy to take more questions as we go along.
Thank you, Victor, for that. Sean, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sean McAnally. I'm a third-year Bachelor of Advanced Science student majoring in physics. And I'm also currently the leader of the SLOKI team, which is the student-led observations for course improvement team in science, which is a really fun student partnership project that we get to run over in the faculty. So I initially became engaged with the Faculty of Science in semester 1 of first year. Actually, I was elected as a teaching and learning student representative for the faculty level committee, and at the end of that semester, I began working with a member of the Faculty of Science team on a handbook to develop procedures for how to engage students on those kinds of faculty level committees. I then helped with the design, development and delivery of the workshop style student staff partnership inductions, which I think all of you would have been engaged in at some point over the last year or so. And they've been a really fun way of getting involved in student staff partnerships for the first time. I then engaged in another student-staff partnership with the faculty to develop a handbook for recruiting students onto executive level faculty committees. And so that was a really interesting partnership because I got to see from the other side how student engagement really works. So this led to me meeting my eventual supervisor now, who co-leads the student-led observations for course improvement program with me. And so we've been working on designing frameworks for better student engagement. So since the very beginning of my degree, I've really relished the opportunity, to be honest, the ability to get involved in these student partnership activities, be it through the SSP operation or through the Faculty of Science. So it's been really incredible.
Thank you, Sean, for that wonderful introduction. Moving on, Brooke, would you mind introducing yourself to a wonderful audience?
Yeah, hi, I'm Brooke Such. I graduated from UQ last year in December, and I'm currently on a gap year teaching English in Japan. So enjoy the view of Japan. You're welcome. I'll be coming back to UQ next year, and I'm definitely interested in getting into partnerships again because I can't seem to stop myself. I've been involved with partnerships since the pilot projects. I was one of the students involved as a partner back then, and as well as in student representation, especially for the School of Languages. So since then, I've been involved in multiple projects, and it's just been so great to see the program grow from like, I think there was 30 of us or something like that at the very beginning to the huge program it is now, and all you wonderful people who are so interested in it. It's really satisfying. And yeah, I think in the end, I've never been able to stop doing partnership, even taking that with me into my teaching and how I work in management and things like that. So there's so much there that's transferable that you can take with you. And I think it's just such a great program. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Now we will be moving on to some of the pressing questions that we felt would be beneficial for the audience members. Firstly, would you please tell us a defining moment in your partnership career representation where you felt it really impacted you personally or professionally? Seb, would you mind starting the question?
Sure, thank you. Hopefully, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think the defining moment for me, and while I believe that, I guess here at UQ, I think we're doing one of the greatest kind of experiments. And while, Students as Partners is not a new, essentially, thing, I think what we've been doing here at UQ is really leading the way globally for a new democratization of the university, where the lecture theatre, I know everything and the student knows nothing system of governance and teaching for the last 200 years is finally over. We realise that there's new models and ways that we learn together, co-inquiry, co-developing and co-learning. And I think I start with that very strong presence because there was no defining moment, much like happiness. I've been seeing it as a process of little dots of moments of joy, of moments of change, from confusion to anxiety to transformation. And those little dots over time and this process has inevitably became this overall product. So if there was a defining moment to really answer that question, Misha, I'd say it was a student that said, but you want my input? You want my? It was almost as if their whole schooling system, they've been told to sit down and listen. And it was only from that moment that their voice was finally heard. Thank you, Misha. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Victor, would you mind taking over the question?
Yeah, certainly. And just as a bit of a preface, I think I'd like to talk about, I guess, two defining moments where I realized the impact of I guess, partnership on a professional impact, first as a student, but then ultimately what happened later as I transitioned into employment. So I think the first thing, the initial sort of wake-up call is when I personally realized that what student staff partnerships can really do is take student grievances to do with coursework or university structures, and really turn those into tangible action to improve it for future students who come along later. And I suppose realizing that and realizing that as a student you can make an impact that leads to other students having a greater experience was incredibly rewarding in the early days of the student staff partnership I was involved in. And sort of looking at that experience and then going as sort of a student staff partner, and then my transition in from a student staff partner into the workforce is more of a employer-employee partnership. That's sort of where it led to. Basically what was happening was me and my I don't want to call them a boss because they were a fantastically collaborative leader. Her and I were working on this very complex transaction for a government body. And what was happening was we collaborated together to come up with a solution to the issue at hand. And it definitely made me realize that the framework that I developed as a student staff partner couldn't have prepared me better for doing that in a professional setting outside of university. So I'm more than happy to sort of herald and say that what's learned as a student staff partner, you know, even though I remember talking about, you know, these are transferable skills, I can say from firsthand experience, they definitely are. So another reason why I'm just, you know, shouting from the rooftops how good student staff partnerships is, because it has made a tremendous personal and professional impact for me.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that insight. Sean, would you mind taking over the question next?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, like my realization that student staff partnerships were such an important thing was really all the way back, as I said in the introduction, in semester 1 of year 1. I left high school, just come into this new university environment. I was a bit scared of the hierarchies that existed with between academics and students, or what we conceive of these hierarchies. And then so launching straight into teaching and learning committee in that first semester, I started to deconstruct these preconceived notions of hierarchy that we as students walk into when we have discussions with academics, and they can be quite intimidating to start off with until you realize that they're just people too, and they're people with ideas that they want to share with you openly. And so that's something that I had to grapple with in first semester of first year. And so when I progressed over into semester 2, and when I began my first student staff partnership, that's when I realized how powerful this whole movement is when I was able to collaborate with leaders of my faculty on the staff level and on the academic level, and be able to create things that we wouldn't be able to do individually. Just as Dino said in the introduction, it's all about the sum of the individual parts that make a whole and make a project really worthwhile. And this is something that I've really tried to transfer into the Slokey team. So the team that I work with now, we collaborate with academics on a very, very close level to help them find out from the student population how what the general perception is of their course. And we can get really specific information because coming to the group of students as students ourselves, we get very authentic perspectives. And so that's what I've tried to instill in the team from my experiences from student staff partnerships, is just be authentic with your academics when you're in those meetings with them, talking about the nitty-gritty of course details. Like, they want to hear what we have to say. And so I think breaking down those hierarchies is such an exciting thing that we have the opportunity to work on.
Thank you so much, Sean, for such a realistic feeling. Moving on, Brooke, would you like to tell us your defining moment that impacted your professional or current personal life?
Yeah, thank you. Anyone who's ever met me has definitely heard this story because I tell it all the time, but I do that because I think my experience kind of highlights how the universities have such an impact, not just on our academic life and our grades and professionalism, but also like our sense of self and how we see ourselves and our confidence and so much more. For me, I came from a really, not UQ background, immigrants first in family, low socioeconomic status. I had the worst OP and it got upgraded just enough for me to get into UQ because of my background. I got those extra considerations. And when I walked into UQ that first day, I knew, I'm Brooke Such, OP13, got in by the skin of my teeth, and I'm the dumbest person here. And that's how I saw myself my whole first year and a half or so of university, as everyone around me is a UQ student, and I'm just here because of special consideration that I'm not like them. And it really impacted how I attempted to take my coursework, how I did my grades, how I studied and other things there, and even how I connected with the people around me. And I was always just gonna survive it, gonna survive uni and get through with, fours open doors and get through it. And the only thing I did do very nicely was that I volunteered quite a bit, just for social aspects and to get involved as a student leader. And that's when the pilot projects came out back in 2016, I think. And that's, one of my managers, supervisors, they really encouraged me to get involved. And I said, absolutely no way. That's a prestigious scholarship, for elite people, and I'm not any of those things. And they kept pushing me. So I did a really, wrote my application in one go and sent it thinking I wouldn't get it. And I kind of forgot about it until I was accepted to the program. And that's when I really freaked out because I thought I'd somehow tricked them into accepting me into this program that was for prestigious people. And I really worked myself up. I was so, up at night, stressed about it, until I finally got to that meeting. And I walked in the door, and two of my student partners, they were talking about their upcoming all expenses trip paid to Israel. And I almost just walked out of that door and out of partnerships forever, until I sat down and I found out I was the only person in that room who actually had experience volunteering in student representation. And suddenly things really changed where I sat in that group and my value there. And it's very much from there, it made me realize that not just my academia can be valued, it's other parts of me, other activities I do, and other things that I have to offer. And that really changed how I fit in at the university and even in academia. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I can completely relate to that non-UQ background feeling. Thank you all for sharing those personal insights that would be valuable for our audience. Moving on to the next question. What advice would you want to give to the students who are keen on collaborating in partnership? Seb, would you want to start off the questions there?
I think every partnership is quite different. I've been, each one that I've been involved in looked or nothing like the one before. But I think advice in terms of giving some guiding principles for students in terms of that framework is, and I think that's what Victor was talking about, or if it was not Sean, about that power relations and understanding that hierarchy, and to be really open and upfront and honest about that, or to incorporate that within the induction and training programs. And I think that's what Madeline's really done well in the iterations of our team as we continue to learn throughout this project, is that we learn from each other. And being upfront about power is probably the greatest invisible elephant in the room with the student partnership project. But once it gets named and shamed and put out right at the front and always questioned, then that hierarchy starts to disintegrate. And that's where we really build trust and respect. And once we have trust and respect with each other, and that happens over time, I think that's the first underpinning advice that I would give. Second is time management, more of a procedural admin kind of thing, that, if there's assignments coming up, be clear about when those are or those exams are. And again, have a check-in with staff and students together and go, look, I've got an assignment coming up in a couple of weeks. I won't be able to give as much time this week that I normally would. Leadership would probably be the third overarching point. And I think that, again, what Victor and Sean was talking about before, about having or taking a capacity in leadership. And, even I think the team, SSP team, have done really well in their guiding questions of their admissions of the programs, is going, how would we ensure that there are co-leadership, a sense of leadership that students can feel that they're a part of that team. And that's really built within that admission scheme. So that making sure that that actually happens, and that making sure that every time that we meet, and I guess that goes hand in hand with the next thing, regular meetings. So either that be online or collaboratively, to share leadership and to have regular meetings as other kind of admin procedural factors that come in. Above and beyond all that is for students to ask questions about the most ideal classroom. If they were the teacher, what would that look like? What would assessment look like? How would you do this better than I would? Asking those questions and putting ourselves in each other's shoes is probably the greatest type of first thing advice that I'll give to our students out there.
Thank you so much, Seb. I'm sure it's really important right now for students to have the time management and being proactive, because October is quite a hectic month. Moving on, Victor, would you want to give some advice to the students?
Yeah, certainly. And that was fantastic, by the way, Seb. Hopefully I can follow up on that. So I think my 2 points just come from looking at things kind of more holistically at what students can do at this particular point in time, being very, very bizarre, and it sort of turned on its head a lot of the practices that we've all been used to. I think definitely just getting that time to check in to both progress partnership, but also for that wellness aspect of it too, I think is essential. Sometimes because working with other people who may not be able to come in and see face to face, taking that time to go ahead, check in, and even though things have gone very virtually, making sure just to keep up that social interaction with other members of the team and staff and students as well. So that's sort of the wellness aspect, I think, of it. That's sort of particular to this point in time. I think the next point I would say when it comes to problem solving is leading on to kind of what Dino said, is the sum of the whole parts. Don't forget that if you're struggling with a problem or a challenge, or you're trying to solve an issue that's been presented to you via student staff partnership, feel free to bounce the ideas off of other family and friends without disclosing too much of the partnership itself. Just having dinner at the dining room table, you bring it up and say, well, what we're working on now is X, Y, and Z. And you'll really be surprised that people can come up with some pretty there's oftentimes solutions that you might not have considered, that are just a little bit out of the box, that you can take back and incorporate into your partnership. So definitely don't discount sort of very, very sort of extrinsic individuals from the partnership, and always be open to sort of taking on new advice where it sort of arises from.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that wonderful advice. Communication is a key important factor in the mental well-being. Yeah. Sean, would you like to proceed with the question?
Sure. So I have three really key ideas that have stuck with me all throughout my time with the Student Staff Partnership Program. And the first one is treating folks with a fundamental level of respect and building your partnership on top of that. And when I mean respect, I don't just mean like being polite at meetings and always listening and all the rest. I mean, show that you really trust them. Also show that you're willing to share your ideas, because that shows that you have a fundamental respect for that person in your team. So don't always be deferential. If you're a student walking into a new partnership with an academic who you may never have really met or spoken to directly, being deferential, so always saying yes to them, is not going to build a successful partnership. It's all about that backwards and forwards, that creative discussion, and that shows the academic that you respect their ideas and you want to put forward your own ideas because you know that they'll listen to you as well. My second one is, remember that your staff partners are people too. They're folks with their own interests, with their own backgrounds, and their own motivations to do the work that they do every single day. So try and find them, identify what they are, and talk about them. That's how you build a rapport. That's how you build a really strong relationship with those people. I've found some of the best relationships that I have at uni are with those staff members and academics that I have done student staff partnerships with, because I've really tried to work hard to identify what makes them tick, what are the things that they find exciting, what is the best part about their job, and talk about that and learn from them what they enjoy about the work that they do. And the third thing for me is be ambitious, push yourself in a partnership to deliver things that you didn't think you could deliver before. Student staff partnerships really are a big sandpit for creative ideas, and your partnership leader is there to catch you. So if you're honest, if you're open, if you're willing to push yourself creatively, then you're going to get so much out of these partnerships. There's such a big opportunity to just try new things. And if you try something and you're not so keen on it, it doesn't matter, because you're in that team environment where everyone's there for you, everyone has this shared experience, and everyone is willing to try and make the best final product that they possibly can. So yeah, there are my three.
Thank you, Sean, for telling the importance of voicing one's opinion, but with respect. Moving on, Brooke, would you like to give some advice to our audience about partnership and how that can be made into a beautiful relationship with the other team members?
Definitely, like, first of all, seconded to all of that. That was awesome. So I just want to put my name on that as well. Endorsed. But yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing with these sorts of things is that as a student, being really aware of what you're putting in your own way, your own kind of self-sabotage, your self-deselection and things like that. And just being aware that, you know, it is a learning experience. It's not an experience to go and show off your fully honed, polished, amazing skills. It is there as a kind of, you know, it is practice. It's a supportive environment for you to learn from people and teach other people what you have to offer. And that's the other thing too, especially for students, is being aware that you do have something to offer and you do have a place in these partnerships. You know, no one in any of these teams is useless or has less to offer than anyone else. Everyone has their own skills, their own things to offer, even if it's something as basic as, you know how to use Zoom and your staff partner and maybe some of your older student partners don't. Bam, gold mine. And even there's always that quote, like, students are experts at being students, or something like that. But in the end, like, you are a student, you know, like, you come with all that experience that comes with that, and you coming just to unpack that in itself is really worthwhile. So I think a lot of people, that holds them back from partnership, is they think, I'm just a student, I've got nothing to offer. But that's only true for like 2 people I've met in my life, and I didn't really like them, so I'm biased. So it's probably not you.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for getting personal with the students and actually telling how they feel about it. Just a quick reminder to the audience, you all can post questions on the Padlet or via chat option. We also have the LinkedIn of all our panelists if you want to get connected with them. So moving on to the question, please share some advice that you would want to give to the senior leaders in fostering partnerships and inclusive practices. Seb, would you like to start off with the question?
Sure. I think this one I got from a joint publication I did with Yvonne from the Student Futures team in the International Journal of Students as Partners. And as that got published this year, one of the kind of key outcomes and advice that we looked at it and came from that was to provide adequate resources. But one that was quite interesting is to provide a shared space and place where students feel acknowledged. Or it could be a room with computers, it could be an area, it could be a physical place. And I know UQ has a hard time right now finding resources enough for even staff or to have classrooms and for HDR places. But I think it's just as important for students as partners and for senior leaders that are listening in this discussion that we provide some type of shared space and place where we all feel that we have a home, as a partnered home. So I think that's one of the ballpark ones that I thought I'd mention. And the other ones that I'd mention are probably similar to the student ones, but on the other, I guess the other side of that coin, acknowledged in time and and uncertainty throughout the process. That if we do miss a couple of weeks as students have exams or assignments, be okay with that. So yeah, again, that comes from setting really clear guidelines, accountability and transparency at the start of that project. So setting some type of online collaborative platform, I'd suggest a Trello board as our favorite that we've been using, but others, you could even use Google Docs or any online collaborative platform that can keep that accountability and transparency of everyone that's going. And that can ensure as well, you can use that for scheduling and time management. Regular meetings, like I said, shared space, online, and I guess the last point I would put there is breaking down those power relations. Sometimes as academics, we don't know on how we feel it was to be a student and how we feel intimidated by academics and being one. And then and I always put my hat and myself as a student and as an academic at the same time. I fight within ourselves for these power dynamics because it's inbuilt within our institution to have those. So sometimes even being visible of it is hard to even acknowledge because it's so ingrained within our schooling system. So while we can say acknowledge, I think power relations have to be something that is inbuilt in our induction and training programs at the start, and put something in the middle as well as a progress checker. Above and beyond that, I think what we do as well, celebration at the end is a really good way to end what we're doing at this showcase is bringing people together as well and to ensuring that happens to see what others of other capacities are doing in other pockets. And it's great to hear like Sean's area in that faculty that I had no idea from other than today about what other faculties and schools are doing in these spaces. So yeah, I think, and I guess one last thing would be ethical partnerships. And I guess that just means more than students just being a student voice or evaluators or beta testers for your new online modules. If we want real change, we have to expect and want better outcomes than evaluators from our students. We want them to be the change that we are looking for in that utopian university. And even though that's just an ideal state of being, our process to get there is the main important outcome.
Thank you so much, Seb. I would second everything that you said, even the Trello board, because I've personally used it with my team and it works fantastically. Moving on, Victor, would you like to share some of your advice for our senior leaders?
Yeah, certainly. I'd love to. So I think the way I've sort of structured my 2 points was 1 point for senior leaders who are already engaged within student staff partnership, but then also for leaders who are still outside of the sphere of student staff partnership. So for the senior leaders who are already involved, it's basically a case of, and I'm sure it's often already being done in a huge degree, but just being an advocate, and sharing with as many people and other senior leaders that you can find, basically telling them of the positive experiences that you've had with student staff partnership, basically as a way to act as someone who is promoting partnership, which in turn will lead to others going through and enjoying partnership. So basically, if you've had that good experience with student staff partnership, you can multiply that by influencing someone who isn't involved, and in turn leading them to have a good experience, which improves, I guess, outcomes for not only them, but also the students that get involved with future partnership. I'd say that that's definitely something anyone who already is involved with student staff partnership can definitely do. And I think my point number two, as a way, as sort of a convincing thing that goes to individuals who are senior leaders but not involved in student staff partnership. One thing that I'm sure we've all recognized is that if anyone could have more of one commodity, it's probably time. Everyone is exceptionally time poor. And, you know, I can raise both hands and say that that's me a lot of the time. But in terms of a unit economics perspective, the student staff partnerships is an incredibly high yielding program for both the staff and especially the students as well. So if you're basically speaking to another senior leader and basically trying to tell them, well, look, what is it that you're trying to do? Is it improve student satisfaction? Is it an improvement in the grades of students? Performing and doing a student staff partnership will be a great investment of your time for not only yourself, but the students you're working with. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor, for covering both the aspects of senior leaders who are currently involved and who are outside the community right now. Moving on, Sean, would you like to give some advice?
Sure thing. So just before I start on the points that I was thinking about earlier, Victor, your point on these experiences being so rich and vital is, I like can't agree with that enough. Like some of the biggest learning experiences I've had during my undergrad, and they're still ongoing, is just in those student staff partnerships and in those opportunities where you get to speak with people with these years of incredible experience that you just wouldn't be able to tap into otherwise. So yeah, absolutely. And Seb, your point on recognizing the journey that these students are going on at the moment, and trying to put yourself in the shoes of those students, is actually the first point that I wanted to discuss right now, because I think that's something that I've seen most in these partnerships is when the academic or when the staff member has the opportunity to step inside the shoes of their fellow team members, they get so much out of the experience. And so, like, I can recall a moment when I was in a meeting with one of my staff partners who is a member of the Faculty of Science team, and she would reminisce on her experiences in undergrad, and then we were able to directly connect to that. And that's how we built up a really strong rapport, is through discussing those shared experiences about getting involved in student politics and getting involved in clubs and societies and getting involved in those extracurricular activities, and discussing how times have changed, but also how things were so consistent between both our experiences. Also, I wanted to talk about, from the staff member's perspective, be prepared to make compromises. I think one of the biggest things about student staff partnerships is that these partnerships evolve. So when you begin them, they rarely end up as you originally envisaged them. And that's not at all a bad thing. That's one of the best parts about student staff partnerships, is that they're dynamic and they evolve. And so I think the partnerships that I've been involved with, or the partnerships that I've seen some of my friends be involved in that are most successful, the ones where the entire team is ready to adapt, especially the team leader. And also be ready to compromise where your team leaders have skills in other areas that you may not have anticipated they had skills in. So be prepared to adapt your partnerships just to make the most of those skills once you find out what your student team members can really offer to you and offer to the partnership. And finally, on a more personal note, you have, as a staff or as a team leader, as a staff member, you have such a huge influence over the confidence of your student team members. You have the opportunity from the very beginning to really foster a deep sense of confidence in your students to do the best work that they can possibly do. And that's something that's very easy to build, but it's also very easy to erode. And so it's really, really important to keep an eye on the relationships that you're building with your students, and make sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel like they're being listened to, and that that you feel like you're making forward progress in your partnership. If you ever feel like you're stalling in the partnership, that can really erode the confidence of your team members. And it's a really difficult thing to balance, especially when you're trying to make a product that you see as really high quality and a really great output for the project, but you're also trying to enhance the skills of your team members. So it's a very difficult balance to make, but I think the team experience is the #1 thing about a student-staff partnership, and that starts with confidence. Cool.
Thank you, Sean, for pointing out the importance of adapting oneself and making a balance within your team and with your team members. Moving on, Brooke, would you like to give us some advice on the senior members of the representation team?
Definitely. Well, I think everyone's made these really good points, especially about being in the shoes of the student and looking from that perspective. I just wanted to build on from that a little bit and say that actually being aware of who your students are and letting go of a lot of preconceptions about it. I remember once I was on a board of education within UQ, and a very senior executive said, I don't know why it's so hard to get students involved in representation and so on. They all used to be student leaders and prefects. Why aren't they bringing that with them to university? And I was dumbfounded. I couldn't even breathe for about 2 minutes after that. But I just remembered thinking like, oh my God, some of these people really think that's their UQ body, that's who we are, and that's the lens we're getting judged with and the expectations we're having with us. And I went up to her afterwards and I was like, that's not me. And I don't think that's a very large percentage of the rest of the community. And they were really shocked because back in their day, you know, UQ was so exclusive and so whatever that everyone was, you know, their school captain of at least 3 things or whatever, I don't know. But it made a really, really big impact on her to actually have that conversation with us. And she's actually now been much more involved in partnerships and so on, having changed the position from, oh my gosh, all these ex-student captains and all that who are just too lazy and don't care about university to, oh, these are people who've never had that opportunity and never had that experience. How can I help with that? How can I get involved? And I think that's a bit more of an extreme example, but I think if you're kind of in more of those senior positions, really taking that moment to be, instead of, you know, shutting someone down or speaking down to a student, actually thinking, hold on, maybe they just haven't had a chance. How can I explain that to them a bit more safely? A comment I had a lot as a student representative specifically was, oh, you just don't know how it's done. And my response used to be, then tell me, like, then explain rather than pushing it off, because it always felt like it was presented in a, that's your fault and that's your shortcoming for not knowing this, but it's not. And I think being aware of that, students are so willing to learn and they're so willing to be involved if they're given the chance. And the biggest thing is not knowing how, not feeling that they can in a safe way. And it's very much your responsibility to make that environment and to encourage students from all backgrounds and abilities to really get involved like that. And if you do that, everyone else around you is going to follow that example. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Brooke. That was very relatable on a student level. So thank you so much. We just have time for one more question. However, we have posted the LinkedIn details of our presenters. If anybody wants to reach out to them on a personal level and want to move on, continue with their conversation. Moving on to a last question. How do you see SSP evolving in UQ and more broadly across the higher education perspective? Seb, would you want to start off the question?
Sure. I think how I see it evolving, I want to start with that question about UQ, and then I'll look at the global higher education movement. I think what we're doing here at UQ in part of the student strategy as well as within the strategic plan. It's been inbuilt within our policies and our framework. So I think where we're starting off is really a great stage one, and where we've really set good things in place for the last half a decade to ensure what we're doing now really leaves the stepping stones for the future. So I think how I see it evolving is we'll move away just from teaching and learning and also in governance or policy, but then also looking in, which I believe would be the greatest transformation in the next 5 years, is that where we start getting students voice and input while teaching and learning is happening within the classroom. And while there needs to be a separation of power and conflict of interest, the greatest thing that I think we can do is to transform as things are happening within that same teaching and learning moment. From then, I also see us developing our scholarship and inquiry of co-researching with our students, not just talking about all the good things, but also about the lessons learned and what we can learn from that process. So as an aspect of scholarship of teaching and learning, and in terms of subject-related inquiry, where I see it evolving at UQ, that we've already had those really good stepping stones to what we can now do, get into not only into the curriculum development or the scholarship and teaching, but really change the way that we are teaching within the moments while we teach and learn together. So to have that reiterative process as it's happening, not just as a retrospective. In the global higher education movement, other than the University of Lincoln and Massey, University of Massey, I would argue that UQ is leading the world as one of the global leaders in student partnership, and as probably one of the most transformational movements of, I guess, the student movement since the 70s. And while we could look at that from a very student engagement or student experience suggestion, which it is so, and rightly so, I think it's a bigger evolving, and I'll call not just an evolutionary evolving. I think this is a revolutionary movement for us here at UQ, and how we set stone is what others will follow, and we can see that not only around Australia but around the globe. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. But yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to the years to come with the student partnerships here at UQ.
Thank you so much, Seb, for giving out that clear picture of how you feel SSP is evolving. Moving on, Victor, would you like to jump to the question?
Yeah, certainly. And it's so just wonderful to hear that UQ is really leading the way and leading the charge with the student staff partnerships, just because anyone, I guess, who is involved in them, similar to what Seb says, just get so much value out of it. So it's there's every reason to keep that momentum and going forward. Completely understanding the fact that I've been removed from the sort of teaching and learning and higher education for the past 2 years. I guess the best analogy that I can draw to and see with student staff partnerships at UQ is joining a student staff partnership, becoming as accessible and as visible as something like becoming a tutor at UQ. As simple as every time you go to a physical tutorial, well, there's a tutor there, and you can see that, and it's very achievable if you do the right things. It's encouraged for students who take a course to become a tutor. So in my mind, in a few years' time, it would be fantastic if student staff partnerships were just that visible, and students could tangibly see that they could sit in those shoes in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much, Victor, for that wonderful answer. Moving on, Sean, would you want to tell us how you see SSP evolving across higher education and at UQ as well?
Yeah, absolutely. From the very beginning, I feel deeply passionate about student staff partnership at UQ. I feel tremendously lucky to have also been granted the opportunity to be involved with the student-led Observations for Course Improvement SLOCI team within the Faculty of Science. And that's the kind of student staff partnership that I see going forward. The Student Staff Partnership team in general at UQ and that whole program is incredible just for its agility and the ability to just commission a project and have it done within a semester. I think that's incredible. And in partnership with those traditional SSPs, it'd be wonderful to see more of this institutionalized student staff partnership working with academics every single semester. So what we do in our team, for example, is we in a course partnership, we begin collaborating with an academic. We're a completely student-run team, just a dozen of us. And we go into meetings with those academics. We flesh out a partnership plan for the entire semester. And during that semester, we go into their courses, we go into their tutorials, into their lectures, into their practicals. We gather data. We process it within about a week. Usually we hand it back to the course coordinator, and that course coordinator is then able to implement changes to their course within a fortnight of us doing our initial observations. So that's a really, really exciting thing that we're pushing forward in EAT and in the Faculty of Science. And that's really where I see Student Staff Partnership evolving into the future if we have more widespread adoption of the SLOKI program. I think having both streams, having SLOKI and having Student Staff Partnerships is just an incredible way forward. I think breaking down those hierarchies has been a really overarching theme of today. And both of those styles of programs achieve that goal so effectively. And I feel so lucky to have been able to see both of those streams working in concert.
Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing that wonderful experience. Moving on, Brooke, would you want to give us an insight of how you see SSP evolving in the future?
Yeah, definitely is more of a general statement, because I kind of see UQ as leading, but the rest of the world is watching and kind of following on bit by bit. I think a really good thing that came out of the points of the speakers before me is like that it will be more widespread, it will be more accessible, and that people will be more involved. And I definitely see it getting to that point where it's just part of your university experience, that people just, you know, most people get involved at one point or another, even if it's not specifically through the program, but even if it's just an informal partnership with your teachers who sit you down and speak with you, or just opening that dialogue in different ways and starting these conversations. I think I can really see this new mindset, and again, I'm going to say like conversation, really changing how we experience university. I think, for an example, if you think about, have you been to, you know, some lectures or something, and you go outside and the first thing you will do is whinge about, what was that? Like, that was rubbish. And like, they're using some computer program from the 80s and showing us a video that was scanned off of a videotape from 1997, not relevant. Just totally misses the point. It's not our experience, and it's definitely not what we're going to take with us into our careers and our professional life. And that's it. You just whinge about it, and then you move on, and then you go to their next class, which is exactly the same, and you just kind of sit through it all semester and then abuse them in the end of semester survey. And that's the extent of the dialogue. You know, it's so unhelpful. It's a bit toxic, you know, kind of sitting on that, resenting each other, but no one's really doing anything to fix it. And I really see like partnerships kind of opening that conversation where you can honestly speak to the people you're working with and who you're studying with and learning from, and kind of express that in a helpful and nice way, and that they are also in a position to actually accept that feedback and to actually work with that and respect your opinions, and even just make the time to explain that to you. How many times have you been, excuse me, teacher, what? And you just wouldn't understand, you silly students. And that's the extent, you know? So I really see partnership totally changing that entire mindset and how we experience university on so many levels, even if it's not within the projects.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for highlighting the point of bridging the gap between students and the staff, which is really important at the current moment. We would like to end it all. We would like to thank our wonderful panelists for sharing their experience and their lessons and giving such wonderful advices to all our audience members and our senior leaders.